All right. Well, Terry, I'm super glad that you're here. Your research is fascinating. It's really fantastic. It's primary research. I saw you. I got first introduced to your work on the History Valley channel of Jacob Berman, who some people apparently in the chat are already familiar with. And I think you were debating Robert Price about the historicity of Jesus and the authenticity of the James Ossuary, and you did fantastic in that debate. It was a really great performance. So, but as we've communicated over email, you're working on a lot of other projects that I find to be both really fantastic, fascinating, and absolutely stunning. Some of your research is really very, very surprising. So, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about why you got into what you got into, and we'll go from there.
My name's Terry Traster. I have a doctor of pharmacy degree, so that's where the doctor comes in. I'm not a Hebrew speaker, so Tavo will have an advantage here. Hopefully, he can explain to you things that I can't. But I just started down some rabbit holes, and it's led me to some pretty crazy things that I would have never guessed were true, and some things that I've never heard of, and I don't think most people have ever heard of. Like what we're going to talk about, the Amidah and Simon Clopas and some other things.
Why don't we kick off with that? Because I think that's really, really stunning and very fascinating research. So why don't you tell people about what the Amidah is, how you got interested in that topic? Because I think I never figured out what the origin point was for your research and your intersection with that. And then talk about what your findings have been, and then I'll ask you some specific questions, unless the audience has other questions they want to ask.
So I got into it. I don't remember how or why, but I came across the Ninth of Tevet, and it being an homage to what they said was Simon Peter, but then the more I looked into it, it ended up being Simon Clopas, and then that led me to the Amidah, that led me to the Keren Yeshua, and then I got into Schoenfield. I don't remember if I shared this with you before, but Schoenfield believes that Simon Clopas is responsible for the ascents of James, revelation from like chapter 7 to 12, and what he calls the Evangelion. So there's a lot to stuff about Simon Clopas, and nobody even really knows who he is.
And I mean, why don't you go into like a little bit of an introduction of Simon Clopas and what people do know about him? So, like for instance, he took over the Jerusalem church after James. Like some of that formative, background information might be helpful, at least for some of my audience who are not as familiar with that.
I can't imagine anybody being familiar with Simon. He, after James, the brother of Jesus, was murdered in 62. Josephus and Hegesippus both talk about this. Simon took over after James, and he was in charge from 62 until I think the year about 107. And he is known as the cousin of Jesus. Clopas, they say Clopas was the brother of Joseph, and so Clopas was the uncle of Jesus, so that makes Simon the first cousin of Jesus.
Yeah, and there's another reference to Clopas in the New Testament, which is on the road to Emmaus.
Right. So Clopas is on the road to Emmaus. That's what Luke says. And then if you read Luke carefully, for I think it was chapter 7 or 8, Jesus no longer calls Simon Simon. He calls him Peter. So after a certain point in Luke, Peter is called Peter. And then when you get to, what is it, Luke 24, the road to Emmaus, it says the two travelers, whenever they get back to the 12 or to the 11, say the Lord has appeared to Simon. Well, everybody has thought that means Simon Peter, but if you read it, you realize that Clopas is the one talking, and he's talking about his son Simon.
Yeah, so potentially he was the second individual who's unnamed on the road to Emmaus.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then if you get into the Codex Bezae has an alternative reading, which doesn't say Emmaus, it says Ulameus, something like this. I'm sure I mispronounced it. And whenever you take that and also look at 1 Corinthians 15, there's a case that can be said that whenever you add in the Gospel of Hebrews, there's a case that can be said that it was James's house, that the road to Emmaus, the house that they went to, was James's house. Have I ever shared that with you?
You've shared that detail, yeah, yeah. Why don't you talk about some of the fascinating research that links? Okay, so the other person, or maybe the same person, is Shimon HaPakuli, right?
Right.
What is his contribution to Jewish liturgy? And then maybe what is the evidence that Shimon HaPakuli is actually the same person as Simeon Bar Clopas or Simon Bar Clopas?
We have what the rabbinical literature says is Shimon HaPakuli arranged the Amidah, and the Amidah is a central prayer that there's 18 prayers that are said 3 times a day. And after, this is all Talmud rabbinical stuff, after the destruction of the temple, after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70, they didn't have the prayers arranged where everybody was saying them all correctly. Everybody was saying them in the same order. So they got what the Talmud says is Shimon HaPakuli arranged the Amidah, and Shimon HaPakuli is nowhere else in the Talmud, and he's responsible for like one of the most important things in Judaism, the Amidah. And right after this, they added the Birkat HaMinim, which is the quote blessing of the heretics, but it's actually a curse. And it says that the same person that arranged the 18 prayers for the Amidah, they could not ask him to do the 19th. And if you read between the lines through the literature, they couldn't ask him because he was a Nazarene. And whenever you look at HaPakuli, it's just PKL is the root, and that is a gibberish word. There's no such thing as Pakuli. Some have thought it means cotton dealer, but it's really just gibberish. And clopus is KLP. So what scholars have thought is the letters were transposed from PKL to KLP, and Pakuli is clopus. So it's Simon, son of Clopas, who arranged the Amidah.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And you're not alone in being an advocate for this conclusion. Yehuda Liebes is one of the most insightful Hebrew and Jewish scholars, and he's certainly not a Christian apologist. Like he has no reason to. But now we're dovetailing into the second part of the story, which is kind of tied to that identity, which is this kind of Keren Yeshua, which is the horn of Jesus. And the fact that that phraseology shows up in Jewish liturgy is really shocking to a lot of people. And there's a lot of different implications. So I've put the PDF on the screen that you sent me, which is the paper written by Yehuda Liebes. So if you want to dovetail into this or say anything about this paper that I have on the screen now, I'm happy to, whatever you want to say about it.
So who makes the horn of Jesus, Yeshua, flourish? And like Tavo said, this is not a Christian apologist. This is, does he work at Hebrew University?
I know he did.
Yes, Hebrew University. I see it there. Yeah, or he did work. Whenever he published this, he did work at Hebrew University. I see it. So we're talking about somebody that works at Hebrew University that has the intestinal fortitude to come out and say, the 15th blessing is talking about Yeshua, talking about Jesus. It's pretty remarkable. And he's not the first one. The Shlomo Pines and then Bruhl in the 1880s, I believe, also made the connection.
Yeah, and just to get a little bit more evidentiary in the basis, this phrase Keren, etc. The Keren means the horn, right?
Oh.
So Keren Yeshua would be the horn of some. The traditional Jewish reading of this is the horn of Yeshua. But what Liebes and others have argued is that this word Keren never shows up in front of anything that's a noun that is a it always shows up in front of a person's name. Like Keren David, it means the horn of David, and that's something that people often talk about, right? So this word Keren showing up in front of Yeshua, it shows up in numerous other contexts, but always before a personal name. So the idea of translating Keren Yeshua as the horn of salvation rather than the horn of Jesus is a bit, it's antithetical to what we know of the tradition, the Hebrew tradition around this.
Well, we also know that Yeshua does mean salvation.
True. Oh yeah. I just mean
double. Yeah, it's a double, like a double entendre there. Yeshua means salvation, and so that's how the theory is. That's how they were able to. That's how the cousin of Jesus was able to get this into the Amidah, like slip it in there, and the Jerusalem. I'm sorry. It was taken out of the prayers in Eretz Israel, but the Babylonians still used this. I'm probably butchering this part right here. I apologize. Maybe you can help me out. But they left it in the Jews in the diaspora in like the Babylonian Talmud, that region. They said no, we're going to leave it in, and so that's why it is actually still in there today. Yeah. I really butchered that, and I apologize.
No. You did a great job. I think the main thing is the Amidah has this line in it, Keren Yeshua. It was put in by this person of questionable origin, Shimon HaPakuli. The traditional reading is that means the horn of salvation, but Yehuda Liebes and other scholars have argued that this actually is a reference to Jesus specifically. Now, this is shocking, right, in and of itself, but it also has a lot of relevance to several other atheistic arguments that we can talk about. But let's briefly touch on Yehuda Liebes himself. He talks about this, and he's actually pretty open about this. He had actual consequences from putting out this thesis, right? This was not something that people took lightly. And in fact, it derailed his academic career for a few years. In fact, his ascension in the tenure ranking to full professor was basically waylaid for, I think, a period of like 3 or 4 years because he put out this paper. Are you familiar with that side of the story?
I am, yes.
Yeah. Well, tell us what you know, if there's any details that I'm leaving out there, because I think that in and of itself is really fascinating also.
We have to remember, and we often forget, that up until basically, it probably started in the 90s with the Birkat HaMinim, but by the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Jews who followed Jesus didn't want anything to do with the Bar Kokhba revolt. And that was a big parting of the ways. But up until then, Jews who accepted Jesus and Jews who did not accept Jesus went to synagogue together on Shabbat. It was only after the Birkat HaMinim, say in the 90s, and then the Bar Kokhba revolt where the big parting of the ways happened.
Yeah, and that's did we say what the Birkat HaMinim was?
Yeah, we talked. It's the quote blessing of the heretics, but it's actually the cursing of the heretics and the heretics of the Nazarenes. And we know it's the Nazarenes because the Cairo Geniza has one of the Birkat HaMinim. I don't remember what century it's from, but early. I don't know if it's 2nd century when it's from, but it specifically said the Nazarenes.
Well, we're talking with Terry Traster. Dr. Traster has some really fascinating primary research on Jewish liturgy and the interface of Jewish liturgy and sort of early Christianity, the proto-Christian movement, and that split between, the proto-Christians and the rest of the Jews, which happened around between 90 CE to 130 CE. But if there are any questions in the audience, we're happy to take questions from the audience as well, because some of these ideas are fairly esoteric and we're getting into some very detailed things. Now, is there anything you want to tell us, Terry, about the significance of this line, Keren Yeshua, in terms of the debate between atheists and apologists? Because I mean, to me, this has a lot of relevance to very specific things.
Atheists or mythicists?
Well, okay, yeah, we can talk about the impact of this whole tradition on the mythicist side of the argument. So, yeah, we could talk about that. Or I think there's other atheists who are not mythicists whose argument is really eroded by this in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely.
So first of all, there's a bunch of atheists who will tell you that really, Christianity is the religion of Paul, and there really was no Judean, proto-Christian movement. It was all Paul who kind of carried the torch of all this stuff. And so this really does erode that argument. This also speaks to the fact that there was a lot more miscibility between that early Christian tradition that was all about the proto-Christians who were all about Jesus, and the Jews who kind of continued to identify themselves as Jews. So this just tells us that those two communities were much more interlocked, and there were maybe people going back and forth. In other words, those communities didn't widely diverge as early as some people like to think. This also shows that Jesus still had a very strong nucleus of supporters among people who were intermixed with that whole Jewish community in Judea all the way up until about 90 CE to 130 CE.
Right.
And anything, why don't you talk a little more about that? And you could talk about the argument in terms of like how this erodes the case for mythicism, or if there's any other implications of this that you want to bring up.
Well, you have the scholars Brule and Leibs that are Jewish, that are I know Leibs is, maybe I'm mispronouncing his name, but I think Brule may have been also, I may be incorrect on that. But
no, I think you're right. I believe you.
They have nothing to gain from this. Nothing. All they have to gain is hurt and sorrow and scorn from their communities. So why would they say this unless it's true?
Yeah, and Liebes, like you said, his whole tenure career was waylaid because of this paper that we're looking at right now.
So it's hard because I want to fight with the mythicists, but then no matter what you bring to them, it doesn't matter. No matter what you say, it doesn't matter.
Well, I would disagree at least a little bit, because I don't know if you knew this about me, but I was a mythicist up until maybe not that long ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I believe that Jesus was purely mythological, because my only exposure was really some of the lectures of Richard Kerr. I didn't really sort of do my own original research. And I'd also want to underscore that you were on the History Valley channel debating with Robert Price, who's a really, really powerful proponent of mythicism. And I thought you really schooled him in that debate. And we'll get more to the ossuary evidence of James, but he was stunned by a lot of your research, and that's a big it's a big achievement in and of itself.
I didn't know who he was, or else maybe I would have been more intimidated or more worried about it. I had no idea how big he was. I had no idea that he's debated all these people and was famous and everything. And then I go on there. He's a very nice person, so I don't want to say anything.
He's very nice. He's a very nice individual. Yeah.
Bob, I mean, come on. I showed you all of this stuff. Come on.
Yeah.
Jacob's a great guy, and Jacob said, "I never thought you would get Bob Price to admit that the James Ossuary was real." So
yeah. So we can switch gears a little bit. Let's go to another question from 21st Century Apologetics. Really glad that you're on here. So can you see the question on the screen, Dr. Traster? Do you want to address this?
You got me on this, sir. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Do you want to rephrase? So I think we've talked about this separately, Terry, and we've talked about how basically, I think we talked about how I think it was in 130 CE, right? That's when I think Emperor Hadrian at that time said, forget the Jews. We're going to sort of discriminate against the Jews more, and we're going to basically rename this area Palestine. And it became it was renamed because of the ire against the revolt of Simon Bar Kokhba. And I think we talked about that in the past. And then subsequent to that period, that uprising of Bar Kokhba, the Bar Kokhba revolution, I think this is you that I was talking to about that. That's when sort of the Christians started to gain at least a little bit more favor, or at least in the eyes of the Roman Empire, there was at least some parsing out, some differentiation of the Christians who were sort of in one category in the eyes of the Roman Empire, and the Jews who were sort of in another category, and that was largely in response to Bar Kokhba. But I think that's why the name Palestine was chosen, was because it was named after the ancient Israelite enemies of the Philistines.
Right.
And so this was sort of an insult to I think you told me about that, some of that stuff. And
yeah.
I think 21st Century Apologetics. Is there anything? This is James of 21st Century Apologetics. So James, is there anything else that you want to mention about this that you think is relevant to the Keren Yeshua argument? And then we can maybe dovetail and we can talk about the James and Ossuary traditions, the Ossuary evidence as well, because there's a couple of other areas of research that I really want to get into in this conversation with Dr. Traster. But if you put an answer to this question, James, if there's anything that you think I've left out in that whole story, you can put your answer in the chat and I'll put that on the screen as well.
So let's not forget that Rabbi Akiva said that Bar Kokhba was Messiah.
Yeah, yeah.
So and if you believed he was Messiah or you didn't believe he was Messiah, you could still go to the same synagogue. And so it's not that big of a deal for one part of, for one, just say denomination of Jews to say Jesus is Messiah, and the others say he's not the Messiah, but yes, we can still be friends up until the 90s. I want to make sure we really hit that, because it really bothers me that there's an erasure of Jewish Christianity. Right? That's probably not even the right word, but
no, that's a very great argument.
It's like these people didn't matter, and these people we're just going to dump on them. And even for scholars, some scholars to say that they didn't exist, it just really gets to me. It really bothers me.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can certainly see why, and we're still feeling the imprints of that. I had a really great debate with James Fodor, really fascinating cognitive psychology researcher, neuroscientist, and his whole contention is that Jesus doesn't meet any of the prophetic fulfillments. And the reason why those prophetic fulfillments were really narrowed in rabbinical scholarship was largely because of the Bar Kokhba revolt, and probably also in response to Jesus. We know that between 70 CE and 130 CE, the criteria for saying this person is a Messiah, this person is not a Messiah, were very much narrowed. And the reason why they were narrowed was because people they wanted to circumvent other people coming up, because there was so much blowback after the Bar Kokhba revolution, and also in response to Jesus. So it's probably multifactorial a little bit. But when we talk about how, well, Jesus didn't meet these criteria, which would be necessarily fulfilled if he really was the Messiah, a lot of that's because the narrowing happened after after the Bar Kokhba revolt. Here's another question from Bandit Vinu. I may be mispronouncing that, but the Koken Hebrew text did survive. This is
right here. I don't know who this is, but yes, correct.
Yeah, no, this is the other research that you sent me, which was really fascinating. This gets to the Kerala tradition, right? We can dovetail into that, Terry, unless you want to go back to the Ossuary discussion, which I think is
I wanted to finish a couple more things here with Simon.
Oh, yeah, let's do that, yeah.
And so let's also not forget that Johanan ben Zakkai, the founder of rabbinical Judaism, declared Vespasian as Messiah. So what we think of, you made me think of this, the definition of Messiah in the first century is not the definition of what we think of as Messiah today. Josephus basically had to say it or else he was going to be killed. And Johanan ben Zakkai told Vespasian he was Messiah. So just to say that Messiah has to do, there's a certain criteria of what Messiah is or has to do. It's just that's 21st century way of thinking it. That's not first century way of thinking about it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. That's fascinating about Vespasian at tooth-ed says so. Yeah. All right. Well, but I think you said there were some other things that you wanted to talk about. I want to make sure that we've
anything else you want to say about the Ninth of Tevet?
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that background? Because I was not as aware of that, and I did some research into that, but I think you know more about that than I do.
So the Ninth of Tevet is a minor fast day. The traditional reason is a fast is, quote, not written. So there's a fast day that they don't talk about why. And then the later traditions, it eventually comes out that it's about Simon Clopas. And there's a Telia tradition, and the Telia tradition is not independent. They do get it from rabbinical sources, that Simon Clopas, the cousin of Jesus, is responsible for what they call the Evangelion. So one of the Gospels, are not quite sure exactly their definition of Evangelion. And I'm not saying this is fact. I'm just saying this is the Telia tradition, that there is so many Greek people coming into the synagogues that the I don't want to say Sanhedrin, but the uppers, I don't know if there was a Sanhedrin after 70, but Simon Clopas wrote or was responsible for a gospel that led all the Greek God-fearers coming that were not Jews according to this tradition, again, not saying it's true, I'm just saying according to this tradition, that the synagogues were being overrun by people that were not Jews, but that they wanted to be part of the Jesus movement. And so Simon Clopas got them this evangelion, this gospel, and then had services at people's houses on Sunday. And so the synagogues were not overrun by people that were not Jews. Again, that's something you guys can look up on your own. I'm just telling you what the tradition is. And then the Ninth of Tevet is the fast day dedicated to him. And they say that he saved Judaism from being overrun and taken over by I'm just going to say the Greeks, so the non-Jews.
Well, let's get to some questions too. If you think we're at a good juncture to sort of shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
So this is from a really good friend of the channel, another YouTube channel. I don't recall my source for this, and I might be completely wrong, but I've heard that Messiahship used to be very open, like you could believe Hezekiah was the Messiah and be fine. And I would argue that that's probably pretty close to truth. I feel like the criteria for Messiah were very broad, and those criteria were definitely very narrowed because it was this issue of iterative messiahs being proclaimed that the Jews now wanted to curtail that, particularly to circumvent future revolutions.
Agreed.
Yeah. Here's another question from Tooth-Ed points out that Messiah, the word simply means anointed one. I think that's what the etymology is, but I think there's sort of other. Do you have any thoughts on that, Terry?
It means Messiah. It means anointed one. Priests and rulers, kings were anointed ones.
Here's another question from James of 21st Century Apologetics. Do you think, considering Vespasian, that they were trying to fulfill Daniel at 70 weeks?
Of course.
So in other words,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what Tooth-Ed also says. Question from @Tooth-Ed, but was it not in 70 CE when Jerusalem was leveled?
Correct.
Yeah.
So was it a self-fulfilling prophecy? They knew the 490 years was up, and they thought that angels were going to come to heaven. Okay, this is not scholarly here, so this is my own personal take. They believed that angels were going to come down from heaven and help them kill the Romans. What they didn't think of, and this is me talking, not anything scholarly. This is personal Terry here. They did not think to consider that God loved the Romans as much as He loved them, and God's not going to not going to send angels to come down and kill all of the Romans, because actually God loved the Romans as much as He did them. And no angels came down from heaven, and Jerusalem was leveled.
Well, let's do a couple more questions, and then I want to kind of dovetail into the other side of the conversation where the judges were all messiahs, correct? I can't say that I know for a fact that they never used the word Messiah for judges, but I think there is sort of a qualitative difference between, the predicted coming Messiah, the fulfillment of the prophecy of David, that there would be a king who would reign forever. I think there are some other qualitative differences between the judges, and if you're talking about like those sets of book like Samuel 1st and 2nd and Chronicles 1st and 2nd, like that whole book where there were like judges rather than kings, and it wasn't Chronicles. I think by that point there were kings, but. So my feeling is they may have used that word, but I don't think I would say that all of the judges were qualitatively on the same level as the Messiah personally.
Right. I think you're right.
Similar question. All Davidic kings were anointed ones or messiahs. Again, maybe they were all high priests as well. See Leviticus 4. I think that there were there were probably, there were usages of this term. But I still think there's probably still a qualitative difference between who these individuals were and what the expectation was for a coming Messiah. All right, well, let's switch gears, and there's a couple other topics that I really wanted to get into. One was the Kerala Hebrew Matthew tradition. This is something I definitely don't know as much about, so I'll just leave the conversation more to you on this. But do you want to do that one, or do you want to talk about the Ossuary stuff, or do you want to talk about James?
Let me see. We talked about the road to Emmaus. Pretty sure that I'm very sure that is Simon and his dad Cleopas, and but I not as sure whenever I look into like Codex Bezae, what we were saying before about Ulameus, and this could actually be James's house. Whenever you mix those things with 1 Corinthians 15 and Gospel of the Hebrews, where it talks about that Jesus appeared to James, and James had taken a vow that he was not going to eat until he saw his brother again. And so Jesus appeared to James and he said, "My brother, eat your bread, for the Son of Man has returned." That might not be an exact quote, but something like that.
Yeah, so I'm vaguely familiar with that story, how James had taken, like, "I'm not gonna eat anymore," and then
Right.
yeah, that's a fascinating story. I don't know that we can be super certain of that either, but it's, all right, well, let's switch gears and talk about some of the other stuff that we wanted to get into, and I'll let you take the reins if you wanna talk about the Kerala tradition, or if you wanna talk about James and the ossuary evidence that you talked about, and or whatever you wanna get into now. I know your ossuary research is really fantastic and really fascinating, so we could talk about that. I think the Kerala and the manuscript that you sent me and those passages that you pulled out that I looked at and compared with AI that's another really fascinating topic. So I can't remember what we put on the itinerary for next. So it's kind of whichever one you want to do.
Okay. If anybody wants, just put something in the chat and I can send you. I made a Excel of every known inscribed ossuary and every link to pictures of it, and some of them are even in color, and nothing like this exists. I spent many hours, weeks of hours working on this, and it's pretty amazing to have pictures in color of these ossuaries where previously the pictures were in black and white books and not very good pictures at all. So if anybody's interested in seeing the ossuaries, just put something in the chat and I'll send it to you somehow.
Yeah, and you've sent me that document. And can you tell me how you got the raw data for that? How did you get how'd you get the primary research to do all that stuff?
There's a couple. Okay, so one book is called Corpus Inscriptionum Judea Palestine, and that's abbreviation CIIP. And in there's about 600 inscribed ossuaries. Those are black and white, not very good pictures. Then there's another one that's Corpus of Jewish Catalog of Jewish Ossuaries. The first one the CIIP is by Hannah Cotton. The other one is from the 90s, and it's by Rachmani. He was a very famous guy. And then the State of Israel has the IAA online catalog, and then there's another online catalog that is by the same people that published the CIIP, but they didn't link the numbers together. So if you're looking for something in the book CIIP, it's a very nice catalog. It goes in specific order, and everybody uses it as the handbook. Whenever they started making their online catalog with color pictures, why they didn't they didn't number the ossuaries the same, I have no idea, but it's extremely difficult to find the ossuaries by that catalog. So what my Excel does, it takes all of the different catalogs and puts them all in one place, and then you have links that you can go look at color pictures of the ossuaries.
It's a fascinating and amazing catalog. When you looked at that data, what were some of the interesting conclusions that kind of popped out of that?
One thing I learned was what we think of as the Christian cross came from the Jewish Tav, which was either an X, like what we think of as an X, like a cross on its side, or a plus sign. And we actually see it in the Great Isaiah Scroll, and other places in the Dead Sea Scrolls. But one place that really sticks out is the Great Isaiah Scroll. When they're talking about messianic passages, they put the Tav there. And this Tav is what we see on ossuaries, which are at Dominus Flevit, which is on the Mount of Olives, and it's where a ossuaries that also have kairos on them and other monograms that have something to do with Jesus. One is IXB, which is Jesus Christos Bethos, and it means Jesus Christ help. We know, so there's a ring in 3rd or 4th century that has the same abbreviation, like the IXB, and it says then it explains it. It says Jesus Christ help Andreas. So if anybody want to check that out, you just put in your Google Jesus Christ help Andreas ring. So the cross was not supposed to exist until Constantine. None of that is true. we have crosses, Tav marks on ossuaries that pretty sure they have something to do with the Jesus movement. I think my favorite is, okay, if you're not sitting down, everybody sit down for this one. One specific ossuary has a large cross on all 4 sides, and then that is in charcoal, and then it is inscribed. So somebody put it into the limestone. This is Greek. Jesus aloth. So whenever you look up what aloth means to go up, to rise, to ascend. So this ossuary has a cross on all 4 sides, and I believe the intent is it's a epitaph that says Jesus Christ, or Jesus aloth, Jesus risen. What we also see in the same tomb is one that's in charcoal, and it says Jesus, then it has an iota, then what's been described as an omicron, then an upsilon, which is like, if you look at it, it looks like IOY. But you can see where the omicron had a line through it, which makes it a theta. So that changes it from gibberish, IOY, that doesn't mean anything, to iota theta upsilon, which is an abbreviation for, like we see in the ichthus, for Jesus Christ, God's Son. The fish, we see iota theta upsilon means, we have it in charcoal, and this is an ossuary that the cave is dated to the 40s, this is in reference to Jesus, God's Son.
The 40s CE.
Correct.
That was getting my next question. How far back does this ossuary evidence go in terms of like indicating the veneration of Jesus? You're saying it goes back to as early as 40 CE. There's an ossuary with a cross on all 4 sides, and it says Jesus.
Do you have it or not? Do you not remember me saying that too? Have you ever seen it before?
Oh, is that the one that you sent me a picture of an IX? Or are you talking about the whole document?
I don't know. Let me see. Are you able to share your screen? Oh, you're sharing your screen. Never mind. Dumb question.
Yeah, if you send me an image, I can like put it up on the screen though as well. Because this does really sort of revise the timeline in a lot of really significant ways. And we talked about that previously. I just kind of want to underscore that for everyone. Yeah.
So it's dated to the 40s. There's a coin in there of Herod Agrippa, and that coin is dated to the 40s. So that's whenever they date the tomb. Okay, I sent you that.
Yeah, I'll put that up in the chat as well.
And so in the same tomb, we have an ossuary that says Shimon Barsabbas. This is interesting because the name Barsabbas is unknown in the Jewish lexicon, except for from the book of Acts. And the book of Acts, we see Judas Barsabbas, Joseph Barsabbas. Okay, whenever we go back and look at the brothers of Jesus, there's a Judas Barsabbas, or there's a Judas, James, obviously. So James, Judas, Joseph, and Simon. In this tomb, same tomb, we have an ossuary that says Simon Barsabbas. Barsabbas is only known from the book of Acts until we get later in the Ascents of James, which I think some people date to the 2nd century. And Matthias, who replaces Judas, is called a Barsabbas. So whenever we see Barsabbas, we should think this is a title. And it just so happens that the other ossuary in this tomb is of a Matthias. So we have Matthias, we have Simon Barsabbas, we have Miriam, daughter of Simon. So Simon is important. Yes, Bar is Aramaic, yes. Ben is Hebrew, Bar is Aramaic. So we have Simon Barsabbas, and we have Miriam, son of Simon. So Simon is very, very, very important because this daughter said she's not the wife of somebody or something else. She is designated by her father. So that means Simon is important. So we have, pretty sure, the brother of Jesus. We have Simon, and we have Matthias, who replaced Judas, this Miriam, and an ossuary that says Jesus is risen with a cross on all 4 sides, and Jesus, Son of God. How's that?
Yeah, that's a mountain of physical evidence. So yeah, and I do have your the document that you sent, and I just uploaded it here. But unfortunately, this file is too large for me to share it on this format.
Okay,
it's okay. I'm gonna collaborate with you. We're gonna make a video about all this also, because I think this is so fascinating and fantastic, and I think it really deserves to be voiced in the academic literature as well. So hopefully we'll be able to collaborate on some publications in the near future as well.
Drives me insane that nobody talks about this stuff.
Yeah,
ever.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about this.
I thought that the other stuff that you sent me, and we've had some questions about this as well, but the other stuff you sent me was really fascinating as well, which is about the Christian tradition arriving in Kerala. And you sent me these passages from the TC manuscript, and you compared them with the and basically I put these passages. Well, why don't you tell us about put it in your own words? Go ahead and tell us about what that research was, what it showed, and the analysis that we've done with it.
So I'm listening to YouTube one day, and something comes across, and it says Hebrew, Matthew, Cochin, India, and like they believe it's 1st century. And I said, well, okay, this is obviously ridiculous. How? There's no way. How did Thomas? And it said it's from Thomas. How did Thomas get to India in the 1st century? There's no possible way. So then I said, okay, I'm going to debunk this stuff. So I started to try to debunk it. Well, it turns out in Thomas's, according to tradition, Thomas is supposed to get there in like the year 52. So I tried to debunk it. It turns out in the 40s, one of the Roman, I can't remember his name. It's like Hippolytus, but it's not Hippolytus. Figures out the trade winds. That if you're in what we call today Saudi Arabia, Yemen, the winds 6 months a year blow straight to India, and then you got to be there 6 months or however long until the winds change, and then you can come right back. And this was actually known before this in the 40s, but it really got, I guess, worldwide. People learned about it more in the 40s, and there was a Jewish diaspora there from the end of the First Temple period. So we're talking about Jews have been in India for 500 years before Thomas, and so I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe he got there. So then I found Pantaenus talks in the year 190 about there was Christians who came from India who came to Alexandria, where he was, Alexandria, Egypt, which was the brain of the entire world in the 1st century. 2nd century. And Jewish Christians came to him in Alexandria and said, we're getting our asses handed to us. We're losing the debates against other religions here in India. Can somebody come help us? So he goes there, and thinking he's going to bring gospels, he's going to bring literature to them. Turns out they tell him that they have a Hebrew Matthew, a Hebrew version of what we call Matthew today. And he takes it back to Alexandria. He makes copies of it, takes it back to Alexandria. Jerome talks about it. Jerome says that he copied it. Jerome says that he met Jewish Christians in Syria or Jordan, that area. This is where the people, after the fall of basically the flight to Pella, we didn't talk about the flight to Pella, but you probably know about the flight to Pella. So these are Jewish Christians.
The Jews left to Pella in around the year 70, I think, right around the description.
Right. Yeah. So Jerome is in Jordan, Syria area, and this Hebrew Matthew is pretty much the same as what we see. Gospel of the Nazarenes is very close to what we see in Cochin, India. How is this possible? If it wasn't already there before Jerome, how could we have the Gospel of the Nazarenes being so much like what Jerome talks about? The Gospel of the Nazarenes is so much like what we see Cochin Hebrew Matthew today. And then I researched more, and all of these church fathers talk about Thomas going to India. All these church fathers talk about there was a Hebrew version of what we call Matthew today before the Greek version. So what I'm saying right now, it sounds absolutely insane. And I realize it sounds insane. But whenever you look at the church history, that's what they said this entire time. So I'm not sure how much I should be surprised and should not be surprised.
Yeah, since you sent me these documents, and by the way, I think there's at least a basis for this in the historical tradition. We know that Pliny the Elder talked about India. We know that Josephus talked about India. So there was awareness of the Indian subcontinent, and that there were cultures and populations there. And it's referenced in the Old Testament, and then there's a document called a Periplus of the Erythraean Sea that talks about it as well. And there are several other figures who talk about it. But since you sent me that document, I actually called a friend of mine that I happen to know who's, I want to say this correctly because I know that I don't want to use these terms. If I mispronounce these terms, I think they're offensive. But I think Malayalam or Malayali, I think the language is Malayali and the people are Malayalam, is my understanding. And these are the ancient peoples of Kerala that trace their roots back. And this is their traditional understanding. So they do have a collective memory that, yeah, this is what happened. That's where they got Christianity from. They sort of identify themselves as, sort of being like Catholics, but they talk about how Thomas came over and spread the gospel of Jesus, and that's why they believe that's why there are Christians in this, I guess, a very beautiful province. Kerala is a province of India. For people who don't know, the main ethnic group in that province is, I think it's called Malayalam, and so those are all the people who are there. And they, like I said, they believe that they're from the same ancient root that you're tracing. So what you're talking about is really the cultural understanding that these individuals themselves have about where they came from and where their theology came from. I thought that would be interesting for you to know, because I haven't talked to you about that aspect of it. The fact that I kind of.
Can you send me his contact information?
Sure. She's a physician that I work with, so I'll ask her permission for.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So she is Indian, or she is.
She was actually born in Kerala. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Is she one of these?
She's Malayalam. Yeah, and she identifies as Christian. Yeah, and
oh my gosh,
that's what she was telling me. She was like, "This is where we tell people we came from. That Saint Thomas came over and spread the gospel to us, and that's how we became Christians."
Incredible, absolutely incredible. You work with somebody like this.
Yeah, well, she's a physician, so this is not like, but this is her. She's like, yeah, this is what I think, what I remember growing up. And anyways, so that really fascinating stuff there on the other side of it. So I think, have you reached out to any Christians in Kerala? Or have you tried to? I mean, I thought that was interesting. I was kind of lucky that I happened to be able to,
I've looked up churches that are like this. I haven't gotten. I want to be crude. I haven't gotten the nerve to call any of them and say, listen, this is some crazy, what I'm reading, stuff is really true, because this rewrites history. This rewrites Western history as far as how the New Testament was formed and what predates what. And it's mind-blowing, and it will really change once we go through all of this, the CBGM, like what we started with, and we can show, which I did a lot of it yesterday. And my brain, I've done a terrible job tonight. My brain is fried. I've been working so hard.
You're doing great. But let's turn it back to the audience. And just so you all know, we're talking with Dr. Terry Traster, who's done some really his doctorate is in pharmacology, but he's gotten into like a lot of very esoteric historical questions that is not part of mainstream apologetics, and definitely not part of like the common degree of scholarship that's in the lay public. But I think really, really fascinating research. So I want to open it up to the audience. Feel free to like chime in with your questions. So now we do have a question. Let's bring Tooth-Ed, because Tooth-Ed's had a few comments that I've highlighted, but it calls into question the Septuagint. So what do you think about that, Dr. Traster?
Well, you're right, because whenever we read this Cochin Hebrew Matthew, they quote what is closest is Masoretic texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we're talking about verses in the Dead Sea Scrolls that after 70 nobody knew existed, or I don't think were copied anymore. I don't think there's been any more Dead Sea Scroll type
essentially time capsules. Yeah.
Right. And the fact that, so what we have is Cochin Hebrew Matthew, and we also have the letter of James and the letter of Jude, that I'm just going to say, I'm pretty sure these are like first century. And the rest of the books are copies of the Peshitta, which is the Syriac New Testament. So what happened? Somebody said, I want a New Testament, like Shem Tov, Evan Bohan. We're thinking that this was used to combat Christians, basically, that this is an ancient text that was copied and copied and copied, and then eventually, if anybody knows what I'm talking about with I've lost his name. Anyway, Shem Tov, Evan Bohan. The rest of the books are just copies of the Peshitta, but Matthew, James, and Jude, pretty sure these are first century stuff and before Marcion.
Yeah, and this is interesting because do you want to talk about some of the scholarship that's behind this question and why the Hebrew Matthew is important? I think we could talk about Papias, or Papias, which I think is the person who cited the Hebrew Matthew.
Right.
So there is some other scholarship around the Hebrew Matthew. It's not a majority or a consensus opinion of scholars, but a minority of scholars do believe that there was a Hebrew version of Matthew. So what you're saying is not, it's definitely not out of step, and it sort of supports what is not a mainstream scholarly position, but at least a scholarly position that's been discussed in the mainstream. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, just so the audience is more familiar with that?
Sure. Well, like what I said earlier, the church fathers all say this. All the church fathers say that there is a Hebrew gospel. And we even have Hegesippus that says he only used the Hebrew gospel of Matthew. I'm pretty sure it was either Hegesippus or Hippolytus. But they said I only use the Hebrew version of Matthew. I don't use anything else. So should we really be shocked that we found something in Cochin, India, whenever there was a Jewish diaspora there, and the church fathers all say that Thomas went there, and the people there say Thomas came here? We're talking, your physician friend in the 21st century said, yes, Thomas brought us the gospel. Now, one thing, I don't want to forget this. You need to ask her if she's a northist or she's a southist. Here's the split. In the 4th century, Persian and Syrians were Christians were being persecuted, so they fled from Persia, Syria, and went to India, and they were invited in and welcomed and everything. But the Christians that were already there, they said, no, we appreciate you coming here and helping us, and we'll get along, but we're our own people and you're your own people. And there was a split. So the Northists are the people that say, we go back to Thomas, we go back to the first century, to the very first apostle that came here. And the Southists say, well, we accept that, and we're great rivals, and we accept that we came in the 4th century. So this could all be make-believe, this could all be BS, but DNA has been done. And the Southists, the ones from they should say Syria, the Syriacs practice endogamy, which means they don't marry outside, and we can trace them all the way back to what they're saying. We can trace them all the way back to the 4th century. The DNA, we can trace it.
These are the Syriac Indians who are in Kerala? Okay, that's fascinating.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And those are called Southists. And their rivals are the Northists. Like one of them, the Northists lived on the north side of town, the Southists lived on the south side of town. That's all that means. And the Northists, they say, well, that's nice, but we actually predate you. And as much as they don't like each other, it's not like they kill each other or anything, but as big as the rivalry is, the Southists never say, you guys made that stuff up. You're not really from the 1st century. You're not really, you don't really go all the way back. So that's really important, because if there's a rivalry like this, you would think that if the Northists were making it up or it wasn't true, that the Southists would say, you guys are full of BS.
Oh, that's an interesting insight. Yeah. I'll try to look into that as well. All right. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. We're on the line with Dr. Terry Traster, who's done some really fascinating and remarkable original research. One of the few people who's done original research into, physical evidence for the historical Jesus. Really fascinating stuff. So question on the screen right now, does the Hebrews gospel originate for us in Egypt, at least up until now?
Well, all we have is Shem Tov, which was in Europe, Hebrew Matthew, George Howard is the scholar that did the research on that. And
is that research in the academic literature? I know there's this manuscript that is published, but it's not published in the scholarly literature. So there's some questions about it.
Oh no, George Howard, Hebrew Matthew, it's out there scholarly. If you don't have it, I can send it to you. It's
I'd be curious to look at it. Yeah, for sure. I think the really interesting stuff that I found was when I did an AI comparison of the passages that you sent me, the analysis was this is not predicated upon the Greek, the Koine Greek tradition. In other words, this language must have come directly from Hebrew. So it must have bypassed the Greek. Yeah.
So what did you look at the eunuch passage? Because that one really sticks out.
Let me pull up the wording on that one. I don't think I looked at that specifically. I'm remiss. But let's do another question from the audience before we get too far, because I did want to. James of 21st Century Apologetics, who also has a really great YouTube channel that I recommend people check out, asked the question: Can I ask you about the difference between translating verb-centric Hebrew into Indo-European languages? So now this may be a little bit abstract or esoteric, but there are some questions. There are some videos and there's some video content that James has made about this, and this became relevant to a recent video that I did. And I think the recent video that I did where this was relevant was, I think it was my discussion of the Trinity. So, but any thoughts on this one, Terry?
None at all whatsoever. I don't know anything about this. No.
Yeah, I think his contention, which you should check out his channel, it's really interesting. His contention is that Hebrew is more verb centric, so some of the meanings get lost or they become inscrutable when you translate the verb centric Hebrew into Indo-European languages, which are more noun or object centric. Anyways, it's interesting content on his channel. I'd recommend checking it out.
Okay, I'll subscribe to his channel.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, we're coming at like an hour and a half on here. So do we have other questions that people want to ask, or is there something else that you, and, I think, we're going deep into a lot of rabbit holes here. So I think the best thing to do after this video is let's chat off online just a little while longer if we can. And then we'll talk about how we can like spin this into like discrete videos and just say, here's the contention, here's the evidence for it. And and we can go into that, and then we can plan like an actual video collaboration where we can have this sort of orchestrated a little bit more, and hopefully even some publications that spin out of that. And James says, thanks. Wow. I think that's in reference to you subscribing to his channel.
Sure. Yep.
All right. Well, do we have other questions from the audience? We're talking with Dr. Traster, or we could go on to the next topic that we wanted to address a little bit. And I forget what that was, but, or is there another topic that you wanted to talk about? we've
Yeah,
hopscotched through a lot of like very
on-
esoteric rabbit holes.
So on this, Jesus tells Peter in the Greek that before the rooster crows 3 times, you will betray me. Okay, everybody's familiar with this.
Yeah.
The problem with this, I did not know this until recently. Roosters were not allowed in Jerusalem because Jerusalem is holy. Roosters, chickens, scratch at the dirt and can bring up dead things and things that are ritually impure. So whenever we read it in the coaching Matthew, it doesn't say the rooster. It says a very similar word, which is like the every morning there would be a priest, like the town crier, who at daylight every morning would like say basically it's time to get up and it's time to do the prayers and everything like this. And so that's a real thing. And the coaching Matthew doesn't say rooster, it says like the priest that does the morning crier, the town crier, the morning thing. So how it's kind of bizarre that it got that right, that it does not say rooster and it does say this. And then there's another part where I think it's 1912. I'm not sure, but whenever Jesus is talking about some people are born eunuchs, some people become eunuchs in this. Well, that's in Aramaic. Whenever you look at it in the Aramaic, it's talking about faith. And I didn't know this either, that any kind of either making a human or an animal a eunuch, you don't do that in Judaism. And like even a bull, you don't do anything to take away its manhood. So, and this has been something used against Jesus and Christianity, is he said something about eunuchs, and no Jew would ever do this. And so in the coaching, it says, it doesn't say eunuch, it says faithful.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So there's all these little Easter eggs. Like, oh, that makes way more sense. There's these translations. There's a lot in Jude and there's a lot in James. I've talked a lot about Matthew, but there's a lot in Jude and there's a lot in James that make little sense in Greek and make all kinds of sense in Hebrew, which is what we're reading it in this coaching manuscript. It's incredible.
Well, that's so I'm remiss. I need to do a deeper dive into those passages that you send and get. And what is the background knowledge that you have to sort of know some of this stuff? Like, how did you like the rooster, the eunuch? How did you find out about that stuff?
I don't really remember. This is something that unfortunately has the past few weeks has just taken over my life because it transforms everything we know, everything we think about Bible transmission. It turns it all upside down. And I've just been consuming as much as I can. And I'm really not even sure where I am picking some of this stuff up.
Have you ever asked the question, why don't apologists talk more about this? Or for that matter, why don't biblical scholars talk more about this?
They say,
have you had this conversation with like real, like I'm a physician, I'm a professor at a university, just so you all know my background. I'm theologically uncommitted, but I'm a professor at a university. I'm a editor for 2 of the scholarly journals in my field that are like 2nd-tier journals, but I was an editor for a long time for the top-tier journal in my field. And I was the top-rated manuscript reviewer for that journal, or one of the top-rated manuscript reviewers since they started keeping records. So, yeah, but let me turn it back to you. So that's my background. So I know the rules for academia in general. I don't know. I'm not really.
I don't hear you. You cut out.
Oh no! Did I cut out again? I think I could. I hope we're not losing the audio.
Does anybody hear Tavo?
So I'm hearing from Dr.
Okay,
Traster.
You're back. Yep. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So, yeah, I was just giving my background. I was saying, so the question is still from me to you: have you talked about some of these topics with apologists? Have you talked, with other biblical scholars about some of these questions? And why are they not things that are talked about in other communities? I'll be honest, to me, when you first sent me some of this stuff, I was like, wait a second, I need a whole lot of background to be able to process this stuff.
Because George Howard focused on Shem Tov, Hebrew Matthew, Bandit, listen, I gotta get through Matthew, Jude, and James, because I gotta have everything out of my mind, because I know that coaching Revelation is also ancient and probably first century. So I gotta have everything out of my mind before I want to tackle Revelation. But excellent question, and I will be looking at Revelation. I want to make sure I get everything in Matthew, Jude, and James first. But Shem Tov, Hebrew Matthew, George Howard, and he kind of, because he didn't look at the coaching, everybody thinks, well, everything that can be done about a Hebrew gospel has been done. And what are the odds that it actually can, like what I talked about to begin with? How could Thomas get to India? Are you serious? And the fact that there is an underlying gospel there, but there is also Peshitta interpolations. Like the first and second chapters are a lot of stuff from the Peshitta, and probably not first century. So from the beginning, scholars look at that and say, well, this is just a Peshitta. This is just a transcript of the Peshitta. Well, it's not. You did some of the night. I spent all night last night.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Even through the night and today on the CBGM, and it's not Peshitta.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I mean, but yeah, that's fascinating.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah. So there's another insight from James, which, in my opinion, Greek primacy is necessary for dogmas, and I think we're caught up with the questions at this point. But why don't let's wind down there. Let's do a couple more questions from the audience, and we'll talk about any closing information. I guess while we're letting the audience type in their questions, I want to do one other plug for the channel, because it looks like there's at least some people in the chat who have not been on my channel or seen a lot of my content. Most of my argumentation is very broadly theological. My biggest set of arguments that I've kind of built up is the CTF argument, which is a comparative theological framework, where I sort of look at the degree of historicity of each religion's claims and make a comparison across different traditions. So I'd encourage you to check out some of that content if you haven't seen some of that content on my channel. Right, we got confirmation that I think that we're both being heard. Are there any other questions the audience wants to ask to Dr. Traster before we prepare to wrap up? Because I want to make sure that he has time to have a really great night and do some other stuff. I really do appreciate you joining us tonight, Dr. Traster. I know it was your son's birthday, so I appreciate that as well.
Not a big deal. We got all the birthday stuff out of the way, so everything's good. So if that's what you're into, like, this Hebrew coaching text should just absolutely blow your mind, if that's already what you're into.
Yeah, is that to me or at tooth-ed?
That's for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to start with just because I've done the most research on it, that Simon Clopas argument.
Right.
Simon Bar. All right, we'll put that on the screen as well. Yeah, I really want to, because I think that's the one that you sent me the first time, and I think most people are not aware of that set of arguments at all. I just don't think it's anywhere in the scholarly debate or in the lay public understanding. And there are so many different implications about the Keren Yeshua line, and it's also something that's very advocated by actual real Jewish Hebrew scholars. So I think that
right.
Makes it a really fascinating. I think it makes it a really good starting point. And then we should do that as a collaboration video. There's also some students that I've been working with at a couple of the universities locally at Cal Berkeley and Stanford who are interested in my CTF argument, and they were asking for stuff that we could do research on together to spin into publications. And I think that'd be a great thing to do as well. All right, any other questions from the audience? This has been. Oh, okay, we got a great comment from I don't know, Juan, if you're just joining us or if you want to ask any questions to Dr. Traster as well. We're kind of at the point where we're probably going to wrap up very soon.
What was the guy's name? I want to make sure I follow him. 21st Century Apologetics.
Yeah, this is 21st Century Apologetics.
I cannot find him. How is it spaced?
At 21st Century Apologetics. He's mentioned to me as well, and he's on if you go to any of my comment sections, he's one of the first or second comments on most of my videos, but there's no space there. It's at 21st Century Apologetics. Okay. I think if you Google 21st Century Apologetics, I think it'll probably come up too. Juana also has a great channel. That's Modern Atheism. Juana, if you're just joining us, I hope you'll check out the rest of the video when we do finally post it. Another insight from at tooth-ed. The chat has been great tonight. Thanks very much for joining. I don't think I had seen your name before in chat, so I appreciate you being here. And I know that at least a few of the people who have been in this chat now for a while are new to this channel. So I really appreciate you joining us. Yeah, and any other closing thoughts that you want to?
I want to make sure everybody knows that the James Ossuary is 100% authentic.
Yeah, we didn't actually talk about that much, but why don't we wrap up by talking just at least, give us like a couple of minutes on the James Ossuary, the fact that there was a trial, and the culmination of the trial was concluding that even though they were sort of denying it as this important artifact, they were like, in the end, right, they sort of capitulated at the end of this real trial that was held.
The prosecutor said, if I could, I would drop all the charges, but it's too late now, basically. And the judge said at the end of it, he's like, I can't even believe this. Like the people that came on that were prosecution witnesses against Oded Galan, who owns the James Ossuary, they were supposed to be testifying for the prosecution against him. Whenever they got on the stage and had to testify under oath, they flipped their testimony. So one of the people that was supposed to be for the prosecution, in one of his reports, it specifically says that there was patina, which would have made, which means it's real. Patina is like microorganism growth on things, and there was the patina was in so the inscription is James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, and the contention was the brother of Jesus was added later. That James, son of Joseph, was okay, but Oded Golan added the brother of Jesus part to make it valuable. Well, turns out that the person that is supposed to be prosecution witness, and it's in one of his reports from 2002, and the trial was like 2011, maybe a report from 2004, that the patina was in the brother of Jesus part, but didn't see as much in the son of Joseph part. So completely lied about his testimony. What happened was Oded's mom cleaned it and cleaned the patina out of the son of Joseph part, and then like ran out of energy at the end of it for the brother of Jesus. The fact that the patina was in the brother of Jesus part, there never should have been a trial. There never should have been any kind of controversy about it. It has first century patina, brother of Jesus. And they said it wasn't there, and it was there. And the scientists said it was there the entire time. I don't know if they just didn't think it would ever go to trial or what.
Yeah, that's interesting. But what I've noticed that is sort of a theme, that people will say things, and then, when they're under oath, they say something different. And that's one of the few examples where we actually have like the archaeological debate has sort of spilled into a legal setting. But that has happened elsewhere. A question from @tooth-ed, and I think the answer is yes. This is geochemically matched to the Talpiot Tomb, right? Talpiot Tomb.
The geochemically, Arieh Shimron is the geochemist, if somebody wants to look it up. Out of the tombs that were tested, it's not close that the James Ossuary is most likely from the Talpiot Tomb. Yes.
Okay, so it's not. So it is from that tomb.
Yes. So we've been on here a while. So
we've been on here a while. Yeah, I'll let you go soon.
I just don't know. I could talk about this for hours and hours, because nobody else in my life cares to hear about this stuff. So I'm happy. So they said, how could the James Ossuary be in the Talpiot Tomb? We have the 10 ossuaries from the Talpiot Tomb. Well, here's how. Because the tomb was filled by mud in a landslide, probably in the year 363. Famous earthquake that caused...
Famous earthquake in the year 363, yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. That was when they were trying to build the third temple, right? And it was...
Right.
I can't remember I actually made a video about this, because we actually have a secular historian, or a pagan historian, who is a big supporter of the pagan Emperor Julian. and Julian the Apostate was, I think, the emperor who was trying to build that third temple as a way of sort of eroding the Christian community and giving a little more support to the Jewish community, sort of the divide and conquer approach. And yeah, so we actually have a really good historical records around that 363 tremor. I mean,
so pretty sure it knocked the plug, the Rolling Stone, out of the front of the Talpiot Tomb, and it filled with mud. In the 1970s, the tomb was discovered in 1980. In the 1970s, there was a lot of construction in the area. There were tombs really close to this tomb that were found by excavators building apartment buildings, and they were some of them were handed over to archaeologists depending on the contractor. You get one that has a heart for archaeology or some kind of sympathy, then he would call the archaeologist to come in. But a lot of tombs were opened and then called out an archaeologist that was there for a day, and then they were filled back with dirt and forgotten about. So most likely the Talpiot Tomb was originally opened in the 1970s, and we have the ossuaries that were in the cokes, that were in the little niches that were covered with mud. Undoubtedly, there were other ossuaries in this tomb. We only have the 10 that we have because they were covered with mud, and the people that came in, the grave robbers that came in, took whatever ones were closest to the door or whatever ones they could get and get out. So who knows how many other ossuaries came from the Talpiot Tomb and were lost. I have a good idea of one that I think is also from this tomb, that not a great inscription or anything, but the design of it matches one of the other designs on one of the other ossuaries. So there's a lot of I've written a paper on how the James Ossuary came from the Talpiot Tomb.
And have you submitted that?
I put it on This is what I do. This is my problem. I find something, I go full out 100 miles an hour, and then I write a paper on it, and then I get burnt out. And I'm like, what's the next thing? And then I don't really ever do anything with it, and I need to. I need to put all this stuff at least on academia or something.
For sure. Well, let's wrap it up. Just in case you weren't aware of the third temple being built, yeah, there was Ammianus Marcellinus was the historian who documented that. He was actually in charge of building the third temple. He was a pagan, and then when they tried to break ground and build a third temple, there were these fireballs that we don't know where they came from, but he said that there were this recurrent problem of fireballs killing all the construction workers. Why don't we bring the conversation to a sort of a close? But like I said, if you haven't checked out my channel before, if you've not been on the channel, this video is going to be posted. I'm going to take it down for a little while just to do some light editing and probably have it up tomorrow. So, but please check out the other content on my channel. I did make a video about the earthquake in 363. I've made some videos about some other things we've talked about. And we're definitely going to be collaborating with Dr. Traster again in the very near future. We've got a really great video coming up as soon as I finish the editing with a longtime friend of the channel, Jackie, is going to be featured in this next video that we have. So, and if you're interested, please come by my channel, click subscribe, like a few of the videos. That really does help us out. We're a smaller channel. And then I'm certain we'll have some joint contact between my own channel and Dr. Traster's channel that I think will be really enriching and will be based on some of these things we've talked about. Any other, I'll let you have the last word. Terry, you can say goodbye or just plug your channel, whatever you'd like to say to the audience. I'm really grateful that you all have stuck around, and fantastic questions really to the whole channel. I really appreciate everyone, to the whole chat here. I really appreciate that all of you have come by. Thanks for subscribing at Tooth-Ed. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who has asked really great questions. Now I'll turn it back over to Dr. Traster for any other closing words.
21st century apologetics, absolutely, that's 100% true. And if you like what I've said here, I have a Patreon that's free. It's just easier for me. I'm not sure why I started using Patreon and not YouTube as much. I think it's easier to post stuff on Patreon than YouTube, but everything's free. It's called Jesus and Nazarene Archaeology. So anything I've talked about here tonight, I've made videos of on my Patreon.
Sounds great. And then at Chronicle 33-P1V, we're gonna I'll be live again right around this time next week. So I'm gonna try and be basically every Monday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be online. So we've been talking to Dr. Traster, and that's kind of the end of a fairly long chat. So why don't we'll close it out there, but I'll be online next week, Monday, 5 o'clock. We should have a really great guest. I haven't really finalized all the details, but I'll definitely, no matter what happens, I'll be online to answer your questions. So I'm really grateful. Thanks very much.
Silent.
Oh, I think hopefully people can still hear me in the chat. Okay. Well,
okay,
not,
you're back.
Okay. We'll close things there, but I'm really grateful that that all of you have had such great questions. Please come back next Monday and please check out the other content on my channel. Super grateful to all of you. Thanks so much for chiming in. Thanks, Dr. Traster, for doing hours and hours on really voluminous research.
Oh, yeah.
And this is just the beginning of the conversation. So if you're interested in hearing more about Dr. Traster, comment on the video. Let me know in the comment section. I try to answer every comment, and we'll have more conversations, and we'll make more content really soon. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. That's it for us today. And I really appreciate all the chats and all the community, and Dr. Traster especially. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.